numerous shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium. At least one person that's been shot, but they're saying there's hundreds of people just running around.
We need rescue inside the auditorium, multiple victims. We have one, we cannot move in Theater 9. Get an ambulance crew in here as soon as they're available.
Aurora 911, where's your emergency? I can't hear you. What address? I can't hear you. Give me the address again. Say it loud.
The suspect is now being named as 24-year-old James Holmes of Aurora, Colorado, and he is in police custody this morning.
The suspect came into the theater with a ticket. Then this man, who was wearing all black with a bulletproof vest and a gas mask on, started shooting into the crowd.
Everything we're learning so far, Pierre, this was a cold-blooded, premeditated plan.
Cold-blooded, meticulous. He developed an execution plan. I was struck by one source today who said, look, this was really like a mad scientist, really like a villain in a movie.
July 19th, 2012, 6:00 p.m., Aurora, Colorado. A warm summer evening settles over a quiet suburban city just outside Denver. Streets are calm, families are at home. It feels like any other night. Aurora is the kind of place where routines go uninterrupted, where people expect tomorrow to look much like today. But beneath that stillness, another story is quietly unfolding. Among the city's residents is James Holmes, a 24-year-old graduate student studying neuroscience at the University of Colorado. On paper, his path suggests promise, a future shaped by science and understanding the human mind. But behind that, things aren't holding together. The transition into this new environment is difficult, and he struggles to adapt. As time passes, isolation begins to set in, and the pressure steadily builds. To those around him, he remains quiet, reserved, easy to overlook. But internally, something is slowly shifting. And on this otherwise ordinary evening in Aurora, those unseen changes are nearly at a breaking point. "11:30 p.m. Century 16 Theater. Tonight in Aurora, the Century 16 complex is filled with anticipation as crowds arrive for the midnight premiere of The Dark Knight Rises. It's one of the most awaited films of the year, the final chapter in the Batman trilogy, and the excitement is visible everywhere. Outside, groups gather under the night lights, talking and laughing as they wait for the entry. Inside, the first attendees move through the lobby, collecting tickets and heading toward their assigned screens. A few miles away, James Holmes is at his apartment, preparing to leave for the screening. He steps out, gets into his car, and drives toward the theater, a short journey of about 5 to 10 minutes. He arrives without drawing attention. CCTV shows him entering the building, purchasing his ticket at the box office, and then moving inside with the crowd, blending into the steady flow of people. Inside Theater 9, located on the ground level of the Century 16 multiplex, around 400 people settle in as the film begins. For a short time, everything feels normal. Holmes sits among them in the front row. He watches the movie and blends in completely. 12:20 a.m. Roughly 20 minutes into the screening, something changes. Holmes stands up casually, as if faking a phone call. He moves toward a side emergency exit behind the screen. As he leaves, he props the door open slightly with a plastic tablecloth holder, allowing himself a way back inside. The exit leads directly to a quiet parking area behind the complex, where his car is already parked outside. He reaches the vehicle. There he changes into protective tactical gear and prepares weapons. His appearance shifts completely, now heavily equipped and concealed. Then he makes his way back toward the theater. 12:30 a.m. Holmes re-enters through the same emergency exit, still left slightly open. Inside, a few people notice him, but there is no immediate reaction. Some assume it is a Batman costume. Others think it's a prank or part of the film's promotion. A few moments later, he throws a canister toward the left side of the auditorium. As it lands, smoke rapidly begins spreading through the theater. At first, there is confusion, people trying to understand what they are seeing. Then, within seconds, Holmes fires.
All right, our next speaker is James Holmes. He has what school did you graduate from?
Westview High School?
He just graduated from Westview High School and will be attending the University of California, Riverside. He will be majoring in neuroscience. His goals are to become a researcher and to make scientific discoveries. It's a good start.
In the years leading up to the Aurora attack, James Holmes followed a path that on the surface appeared largely ordinary. He was born in 1987 in San Diego County, California, and grew up in the area in a relatively stable early environment. As a child, he was quiet and academically capable, performing well in school. However, around the age of 12, after moving home, his behavior began to shift. He became increasingly withdrawn and isolation started to take hold. Through his teenage years, those difficulties continued in the background, shaping a pattern of emotional detachment and instability that developed over time. Despite this, he continued his education and eventually earned an undergraduate degree from the University of California, Riverside, at age 22. He then relocated to Aurora after being accepted into a PhD neuroscience program at the University of Colorado. At first, the move suggested promise, a structured academic path, and a future in research. But over time, underlying issues began to surface. His personal life became unstable, including a difficult breakup with his girlfriend, which added emotional strain. At the same time, his academic performance declined. He began failing assessments and disengaging from his studies. Eventually, Holmes sought help through university mental health services. He was seen multiple times by Dr. Lynn Fenton, a psychiatrist working with the University of Colorado's Student Mental Health Services. During her evaluations, she identified significant concerns about his mental state and patterns of thinking. She noted severe social withdrawal and described his thought processes as at times resembling psychosis, also considering the possibility of a schizoid personality disorder. She further documented concerns about persistent violent fantasies, including thoughts about killing large numbers of people, which he spoke about in a general, abstract way, without ever sharing specific plans, leading them to be understood as thoughts rather than indications of immediate action. As a precaution, Dr. Fenton reported her observations to university officials to raise awareness about his behavior and potential risk. As part of the response, he was prescribed sertraline in an effort to manage symptoms of depression and anxiety. There was a brief period of improvement, but it did not last. He stopped taking the medication, and withdrawal, combined with ongoing instability, contributed to further decline. By June 2012, his condition had deteriorated to the point that he withdrew from his PhD program, effectively ending his academic pathway and leaving the university environment entirely. Just days after leaving the program, he was seen purchasing multiple firearms legally after passing background checks. Despite earlier concerns raised in clinical and academic settings, he was still able to walk into a gun store, complete the required checks, and leave with the weapons he needed. Those purchases marked a clear turning point. What had previously existed as warning signs now shifted into preparation. From that moment onward, the timeline no longer remained theoretical. It was already in motion. 12:30 a.m. Inside Theater 9, the situation shifts in seconds, from confusion to crisis. After the canister is thrown into the auditorium, a strange haze begins to fill the space. At first, many in the audience are unsure what is happening. In the dark, some assume it's part of the film or a stunt tied to the midnight premiere. But that confusion doesn't last. As the first shots are fired, the reality becomes clear. Panic spreads almost immediately through the packed theater. People begin scrambling for exits, crouching between seats, or dropping to the floor in an attempt to hide. Others rush toward the aisles, trying to escape through any available door, but movement is chaotic and restricted by the crowded rows. Inside the building, fear replaces excitement in a matter of moments. The sound of gunfire and the confusion of hundreds of people trying to react at once creates a scene of total disorder.
Where's your emergency? I can't hear you. What address?
12:32 a.m.
I can't hear you. Give me the address again. What address? Say it loud.
Emergency calls begin coming in. The first 911 reports describe an active shooter inside the complex, with witnesses reporting gunfire inside Theater 9.
Okay, is this the Century 16 theater shooting? Do you know anybody who's been shot? Okay, who's been shot? Who do you know that's been shot?
My two cousins.
Okay, where are they right now?
They're on the floor of the store.
Are they breathing?
As calls increase, dispatchers and responding officers struggle to make sense of the information coming in.
15 and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium. 15 and 314, there is at least one person that's been shot, but they're saying there's hundreds of people just running around.
Eventually, the first units are sent out based on limited details. With police not yet fully understanding the extent of the situation unfolding inside the building.
Okay, hold that position. Hold your suspect. I've got a child victim. I need rescue at the back door of Theater 9 now.
12:39 a.m. 9 minutes after the initial shots, the first police officers arrive at the theater. The scene is immediately chaotic and difficult to assess.
We got another person outside shot in the leg, a female. I got people running out of the theater that are shot in room 9.
Great, Cruiser 49. All cars coming and set up a perimeter around the entire mall. Set up a perimeter around the entire mall. All cars do not need to go into the movie theater.
As officers move toward the building, they begin to find scattered items across the area, including 3 .40-caliber handgun magazines, a shotgun, and a large drum magazine left on the floor at the entry of the theater. It quickly becomes clear the scale of the incident is far beyond initial reports. Outside, the parking lot is jammed with fleeing civilians, arriving police units, and emergency vehicles. The congestion and confusion make it difficult for ambulances to reach the rear of the complex.
I got 7 down in Theater 9. 7 down.
Copy, we'll notify fire. 7 down in Theater 9.
69 guys on the east side of block. East side. I need officers on the east side to block it.
With limited access for medical teams, some of the injured are transported to nearby hospitals in police vehicles to speed up evacuation.
Metro 10, Lincoln 25. Do I have permission to start taking some of these victims via car? I got a whole bunch of people shot out here. No rescue. Yes, load them up. Get them in cars. Get them out of here. We have one. We cannot move in Theater 9. Get an ambulance crew in here as soon as they're available.
Outside and around the building, information remains fragmented. Officers work to secure the area, evacuate anyone still inside, and establish control of the scene, while also actively searching for the gunman.
Cruiser 49, I'm already identifying parties who saw the entire thing as it unfolded. So cars continue to stop people and ask questions as to what they saw.
A few moments later, a suspect wearing a gas mask is sighted near the rear of the theater. At first, officers assume he may be another responding officer due to his protective tactical gear. But that assumption quickly changes as they close distance and realize he does not match any known law enforcement presence.
16 Adam, I need a marked car behind the theater, Sable side. Got a suspect in a gas mask.
It becomes clear they have found their suspect. Approximately 15 minutes after the first shots, James Holmes is apprehended beside his vehicle near the back of the complex.
Hold the air 1 second. Cars with that white car in the rear of the lot. Is that a suspect? Yes, we've got rifles, gas masks. He's detained right now. I've got an open door going into the theater. Okay, hold that position. Hold your suspect.
He does not resist. Officers describe a calm, detached demeanor as he is taken into custody. A stark contrast to the chaos still unfolding around the theater. "1 a.m. As the scene outside the theater is still unfolding, James Holmes is transported to the Aurora Police Department, only a short distance from the theater, where he is taken into custody. During initial questioning, he provides information that immediately changes the scope of the situation. He tells officers that his apartment is booby-trapped. What had already been a large-scale investigation suddenly expands. Police now face the possibility of a second, potentially catastrophic threat. 1:30 a.m. Officers begin coordinating a response, shifting resources toward Holmes' residency while maintaining control at the theater scene. By 2 a.m., police units arrive at his apartment complex on Paris Street. The building is quickly secured, and an immediate evacuation begins. Residents are woken and instructed to leave without delay as officers assess the potential danger. 4 a.m. As more information is gathered, the evacuation zone expands. Additional surrounding buildings are cleared as authorities begin to understand the scale and complexity of the threat. Throughout the early morning hours, investigators attempt to assess the apartment from a distance. Using a fire truck bucket and extended camera equipment, they peer through the third-floor window. Inside, they identify a network of wires, containers, and materials arranged in a way that suggests a highly complex and dangerous setup.
He was hoping to potentially lure the police there and then distract them from seeing what he was doing at the massacre at the movie theater. Now they have to figure out what to do about that, and they may have to actually bomb or explode the entire building in order to get rid of it.
The situation is no longer limited to the events at the theater. A second scene, potentially just as dangerous, is now unfolding.
Today, police sources are describing James Holmes as a mad scientist, a calculating killer who transformed his home into a bomb factory, a death trap.
Police have evacuated a 5-block area around the apartment complex. That's because they've discovered what the police chief described as sophisticated explosives. The FBI says that investigation could go on for days.
9 a.m. With the area secured overnight, bomb disposal teams begin the process of neutralizing the devices inside Holmes' apartment. Due to the level of risk, direct entry is avoided. Instead, a bomb squad robot is deployed to assess and interact with the interior. Investigators confirm the presence of multiple explosive materials, including fuel sources and components designed to cause significant damage. As the robot is sent deeper into the apartment, investigators identify a tripwire system connected to a fishing line. It is linked to a chemical ignition mechanism designed to trigger the devices. The setup appears highly unstable, with authorities believing even a small disturbance could cause an explosion. To prevent the system from activating, bomb disposal teams carry out a controlled detonation aimed at disabling the triggering mechanism. The operation is successful. With the primary trigger disabled, investigators move to the next phase of the operation. The robot is sent to locate and neutralize any additional hazards remaining. Devices are carefully disabled and removed piece by piece. The process is slow and methodical. Every movement inside the apartment carries risk, forcing bomb technicians to proceed with extreme caution as the operation stretches on for hours. Only later in the afternoon, after an extensive search and repeated sweeps of the apartment, do authorities finally determine that all major threats have been neutralized. The immediate threat, which had gripped the complex for hours and extended the fear far beyond the theater itself, is finally over.
This is breaking news.
And welcome back, everybody. We continue to follow this breaking story coming out of Aurora, Colorado this morning. That is near Denver, east of Denver, a sprawling suburb. Aurora is east of Denver. At least 12 people are dead, 50 others are hurt after a shooting at a movie theater at midnight.
They believe the suspect came into the theater with a ticket, and then this man who was wearing all black with a bulletproof vest and a gas mask on started shooting into the crowd.
With the threat finally over, the reality of what has happened begins to settle over Aurora. Television networks interrupt regular programming. Reporters rush to the theater, and within hours, the story dominates headlines across the United States, and around the world.
The suspect is now being named as 24-year-old James Holmes of Aurora, Colorado, and he is in police custody this morning.
Sources tell us Holmes is a classic lone wolf. No ties to terrorist organizations and no criminal record to speak of. The only record we know of is a speeding ticket.
As more information emerges, the magnitude of the attack becomes impossible to ignore. The shooting is rapidly recognized as one of the deadliest mass shootings in recent American history.
Everything we're learning so far, Pierre, this was a cold-blooded, premeditated plan.
Cold-blooded, meticulous. He developed an execution plan. I was struck by one source today who said, look, this was really like a mad scientist, really like a villain in a movie.
Speculation spreads rapidly across news outlets and online forums. Conflicting information circulates throughout the day, while rumors began linking the attacker to the Joker character from Batman films.
And then Holmes apparently attempted to make himself into the Joker character of the Batman series.
He had his hair painted red. He said he was the Joker.
As people search for an explanation behind what happened, families of the victims begin gathering at hospitals and emergency centers, waiting for news. Many wait for hours, praying to see their loved ones emerge. But for some, that moment never comes.
A short distance from the cinema where, just 3 days before, America witnessed its latest shooting massacre. Thousands of people gathered in front of the town hall to remember the lives lost and lives changed.
In the days following the attack, the focus begins to shift from the scale of the incident to the people behind the numbers. As the full details emerge, the human cost becomes clear. 12 lives are lost. Dozens more are injured. Among them is Victoria Moser Sullivan, just 6 years old, and the youngest victim of the attack. Across Aurora, the community begins to respond. Vigils are held, crowds gather in silence, holding candles, leaving flowers, and remembering those who were lost. Families, friends, and strangers come together, united by grief.
A handful knew the victims, the majority did not, but they were all acknowledging the magnitude of what happened in this Colorado city. Why are you here?
Because we were out that night watching the movie and it could have easily been us.
I'm thankful that we were at a different movie theater, you know, but at the same time, my heart goes out to the friends and family that were there that night.
And this couple were there that night. Evan Farris threw himself over his fiancée Rochelle. His leg was crushed in the panic to escape from the gunman.
It feels good to know that there's this many people supporting us, to know that this many people care.
And demonstrate what it means to be a community of good.
The woman right next to me is dead. There's so much support around us right now. If it wasn't for everybody here, this would be so much harder.
What was once an ordinary suburban city becomes the center of national attention. Aurora is no longer just the location of an attack. It becomes a symbol of collective mourning and of lives that will not be forgotten.
Come on in, why don't you have a seat? If you will. And they're going to leave us. Got you some juice. It says you like juice better than water, so I gotta get you water. Okay. Well.
As the investigation begins, the focus shifts from what happened to why. Questions start to build, not just about the events of that night, but about the mental state of James Holmes. In an effort to understand, investigators turn to a series of psychiatric assessments. The goal is clear: to find an explanation, a motive, something that makes sense of it.
At the deepest of the depressions, did you think about hurting yourself or killing yourself?
No.
How about hurting or killing other people?
Yeah, I'd kind of transferred it into kind of homicidal thoughts.
And they are looking for answers, but those answers are not straightforward. As the investigation expands, evidence begins to surface. In the days following the attack, investigators recovered a notebook that became a key piece of evidence. It was later confirmed that James Holmes had sent it to his psychiatrist on the morning of the attack.
We're getting a look into the mind of a madman. Today, Colorado prosecutors made public the notebook of theater shooter James Holmes.
Inside were pages of handwritten notes, sketches, and diagrams reflecting his thoughts and mental state.
Prosecutors are attempting to use the notebook to undermine Holmes' claim that he was legally insane at the time of the July 2012 attack.
Among the material were rough plans and location diagrams connected to the attack. On one page, he listed potential targets, including the movie theater.
Another section of that notebook titled Case the Place. That appears to show him planning his massacre. Now, in it, Holmes debates the various methods of attack, including bombs and biological warfare, and locations, including a movie theater and an airport, and he writes, quote, targets, random.
The content revealed not only intent, but also fragmented and disorganized thinking.
In his notebook, Holmes also wrote about the emergency response. One of the last pages shows the theater in relation to the nearby police department and estimates it would take police 3 minutes to arrive.
In parts of the notebook, he wrote about his broken brain, alongside references to death and violence as a possible solution to his internal state, all of which reflected how deeply unstable he was at the time.
The notebook ends with 8 consecutive pages with the words "why" scribbled in handwriting that gets bigger and bigger.
While investigators searched his apartment, they uncovered extensive digital evidence. On his computer, they found records documenting the purchase of weapons, ammunition, and protective tactical gear used in the attack. Further analysis also revealed online research connected to preparation, including searches related to mass shootings, attack tactics, and methods of carrying out large-scale violence. Taken together, the evidence established a clear pattern of preparation, showing that the attack had been carefully planned over an extended period rather than carried out impulsively. Further evidence was recovered from his phone. Messages sent to a friend contained references to violent thoughts and an urge to kill people. Within those exchanges, James Holmes also described what he referred to as a theory of human capital.
That's the kind of human capital idea of placing values on human beings. So I give them an arbitrary value of 1 if they're alive and 0 when they're dead.
He appeared to believe that taking the lives of others could somehow increase the value or significance of his own life, reducing people to numbers and abstract worth rather than individuals. As the investigation progresses, the evidence begins to connect into a larger picture. What emerges is not an impulsive act, but a progression toward violence that had been building over time. April 2015. Nearly 3 years after the events, the case finally enters the courtroom, as the legal process begins to determine responsibility for what happened that night.
People versus James Holmes, 12 CR 1522. Appearances, please.
It was the first glimpse of the man accused of the Aurora massacre. 24-year-old James Holmes sat motionless throughout the 10-minute hearing. For those searching in his face for clues, any clues as to why there was nothing there.
Cause to believe you're committed the offense of first-degree murder, which is a Class 1 felony under Colorado law. Ordinarily, individuals are entitled to bail. Given the nature of the charges, you are currently being held on a no-bond hold.
James Holmes pleads not guilty by reason of insanity to more than 160 counts of murder and attempted murder related to the attack. Court proceedings begin, and the central issue of the trial quickly comes into focus: whether or not he understood the nature of his actions at the time.
Prosecutors have two doctors who say that James Holmes was sane during the shooting, but the two doctors who said he was insane saw him closer to the time of the event and may have had better conditions to examine him.
Psychiatrists involved in the case sharply disagree over his mental state. Some diagnose him with severe mental illness, including schizophrenia, while others conclude that despite these conditions, he remains legally sane and fully aware of the consequences of his actions.
Dr. William Reed spent 22 hours talking to James Holmes last summer. Before the interview, Reed told the court he considered everything the prosecution and the defense provided him.
Despite whatever that serious mental illness is it your opinion that the defendant on July 19th and 20th had the capacity to know right from wrong, as the court had just defined it for this jury?
Yes.
Is it your opinion that the defendant had the capacity to form the intent to act after deliberation and to act knowingly?
Yes, it is.
Throughout the weeks, the courtroom becomes a space of testimony and reconstruction. Victims and survivors describe the events of that night in detail. Families of those who were killed also take the stand, including the mother of Veronica Moser Sullivan, speaking about her daughter and the life that was taken.
How are you different after the murder of your daughter?
Very different. Just deal a lot with depression and anxiety. I don't know who I am anymore, because I was a mom when I was 18, and that's all I knew how to be. And now I'm not a mom.
As the trial nears its end, the evidence presented clearly builds a consistent picture of planning, awareness, and intent. Prosecutors argue that despite his mental health issues, James Holmes understood both what he was doing and the consequences of his actions. As closing arguments approach, attention shifts toward the jury and the long wait for a verdict. For victims, survivors, and families, the uncertainty becomes another emotional strain after months of reliving the events of that night.
Victims will be impacted by that decision in an enormous way for years if the death penalty is sought. That's a very long process that impacts their lives for years. And so they will want to have, and we will want to get their input before we make any kind of a decision on that.
Even if the jury decides to do life imprisonment or the death penalty phase, I believe I'll be happy with either decision, either way. But knowing for the fact that it's finally over with is my biggest hope for, so I can be able to move on.
On July 16th, 2015, the jury finally delivers its verdict: guilty on all counts.
I want to make it clear that it is the court's intention that the defendant never set foot
in free society again. The intention of my sentences is that he spend every single day of the rest of his life in prison.
Holmes is sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders, along with an additional 3,318 years in prison for attempted murder and other charges. After almost 3 months of intense testimony and courtroom proceedings, many victims, survivors, and families describe a sense of relief as the trial finally comes to an end. But for some, that relief is mixed with disappointment. The jury does not impose the death penalty after one juror votes against it.
There was one solidly held out, and the others, there's 2 that were not completely decided. But at the point where we knew that one was an absolute holdout, we ended the deliberations because that person was solidly in favor of the life sentence.
People's reactions are deeply divided. Some families say the verdict finally brings a measure of justice, while others struggle with the reality that no sentence can undo what happened.
Right now, it's the disappointment and hearing it as Judge Samore is reading those verdicts, hearing it in those soft sobs and those moans from those family members of the people that we can't ever see again. That's the part that gets me, is I asked them to trust me and to follow me, and I would try to get them to a place that I thought was justice, and I came up short. And that's my fault, and that's what hurts.
Even so, for many connected to the case, the verdict brings a form of closure. The certainty that James Holmes will spend the rest of his life in prison, and that the long legal chapter surrounding the attack is finally over. More than a decade after the attack, James Holmes remains imprisoned in a maximum security facility, living in near total isolation under constant supervision. Permanently removed from society, he will spend the rest of his life behind prison walls, while the impact of what happened continues to be felt far beyond them. The case of the Aurora shooting leaves behind questions that don't settle into any single explanation. It raises difficult questions about mental illness, clinical care, and diagnosis, and whether anything could have been done differently to prevent it. But beyond the investigation, beyond the courtrooms and the analysis, the reality remains human. In a single night, ordinary lives were broken apart without warning, leaving families to carry a loss that does not resolve with time or legal closure. It remains in the people who were there, and in a community that was forced to rebuild itself around something it can never undo.